Welcome to our webinar, Closing the Gap. We'll get started in just a minute here. We're going to let some people who are joining get in and get settled, and then we'll get going. All right. Well, time is of the essence, so we'll get right into it. Before we get started, a little housekeeping. The session is being recorded, and we will be sending, a video of the presentation out to everybody who's registered. And also, we have opened the private chat. We are intending on having a few minutes at the end of the session for a live Q&A. So if you have any questions for our panelists as we go, please feel free to submit them to the chat where we'll be monitoring it. And to get us kicked off, I'll turn it over to Krista Korfmacher from ACUMA.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. And I'm honored to kick off this ACUMA Inside Track webinar hosted by our friends over at Flowify. As an ACUMA member, we appreciate Flowify's commitment to educating credit unions. Stay tuned for a great discussion on how credit unions can leverage modern technology to streamline operations, enhance borrower satisfaction, and maintain their unique member-focused advantage. On behalf of ACUMA, I want to say happy holidays to everyone out there, the ACUMA community and Flowify and our speakers today. Everyone, please keep an eye on our website and also our LinkedIn social media. We are kicking off a lot of amazing events online and in person in 2025, including webinars, podcasts, our YPN meetings, other new virtual networking meetings that we will be releasing in January, along with our in-person events, such as our summit meeting in Pensacola at the Navy Federal Credit Union. We have 2 workshops coming up in the spring in Savannah and Seattle. And then, of course, the Make Your Mark annual conference in Denver. So we hope to see you face-to-face if possible next year, and definitely on some of our webinars. It's a pleasure to work with you all. And Eric, it was great working with you and your team at Flowify. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Krista. We really appreciate everything from yourself and ACUMA to get this organized. And on that note, we'll introduce our speakers for today's webinar. So first up, we have Carrie Polixa. Carrie has 17 years of experience in the mortgage industry, famously starting as a loan processor right before the 2008 financial crisis. Carrie currently serves as the Mortgage Business Operations Analyst at UFCU, where she leads the project space for mortgage technology, collaborating with leadership and subject matter experts to streamline processes, evaluate vendor partnerships, and enhance the operational efficiencies of the mortgage services provided by UFCU. So welcome, Carrie.
Thanks all for having me. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Carol Burke. Carol is a regional director of enterprise sales at Bonzo, where her focus is helping companies build their businesses through better communication to expand client, prospect, and referral partner relationships. She has 27 years of experience in sales and account management and has spent the last 19 years of that in the mortgage industry. Her goal has always been helping companies maximize the revenue by streamlining services and lowering their overall operating costs. So welcome, Carol.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And finally, with 23 years of experience in the mortgage industry, Jason Mapes is a result-driven sales executive with a deep understanding of the mortgage technology ecosystem. His career includes roles in loan origination, branch management, and sales at top organizations like Encino, the former Ellie Mae, now ICE Mortgage Technology, Unify, and Lenders One. He now serves as the head of sales at Flowify. So welcome, Jason.
Hello, pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. So we wanted to start with a brief discussion of the current state of the market. The part of the point of this webinar is to highlight the growing influence of digital fintech-driven lenders and how credit unions like UFCU and Carrie are adjusting and adapting to build new integrated tech stacks to kind of dip the toe into that digital space. So what we've got here is just a little bit of background. These are some numbers pulled from a Housing Wire article from September of 2024, where the CFO of Rocket Mortgage, Brian Brown, spoke about their place in the market, where they're looking to go, and their growth strategy for the next couple of years. And what we learned was that the retail direct-to-consumer market now occupies about half of the overall mortgage market. And if you look at Rocket's plans to grow into even more of market share in the next couple of years, it's pretty clear that their strategy is to kind of overtake what we've got going on. I mean, I believe everybody on this call understands that the credit union movement is very, important to our local communities, and part of that is expanding access to homeownership via mortgage services. So let's get started. Carol and Jason, I'd love to hear your thoughts as you've worked with many credit unions, what you guys are seeing, how credit unions are coming into the fold for more modernization and digitization of the mortgage services.
Well, Jason, I'll go ahead and take it if you don't mind. I will tell you, just from my experience in, the technology space, credit unions have been traditionally conservative. So they're, relying on their members and, just cross-selling within the credit union space and not really feeling like they needed to have good technology or marketing or, keeping in touch with people outside of their membership. But my gosh, have I seen it change, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, whereas I'm seeing these credit unions bring on this amazing technology, UFCU for one, and, realizing that your good tech stack, it attracts good loan officers. And then also it helps you market outside of your membership. I'm even seeing, LOs with boots on the ground outside of that membership, casting a wider net, bring them back in. And then it helps the credit union, tenfold, because then you have other services that you can provide those and add to that new membership. So it's very impressive what I've been seeing out there. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. I see a lot too with the credit unions now looking in to be able to get Rocket out of their area. And what I'm seeing them do is look for more platforms that can seamlessly sync with the other tech that goes there. And I think that's important. Platforms like Flowify, Bonzo, that sync very well with the LOSs out there. For the most part, we can automate document collection. We can automate a lot of different things that speeds up that process and ultimately give a better experience for the member. And that's the goal for every credit union, I believe, from my talks, is what is that experience for the member? Is it easy for them to get through the process? Can they do it quickly, but still have that personal touch by the loan officer and the credit union for those members?
And Carrie, yeah. And Carrie, you can probably attest to the fact that it helps when the vendors play well together.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that particularly for, credit unions tend to be smaller organizations, right? We're not large national banks by and large. So having partners that are willing to work with us and create technology that will work for our members and our goals and what we're trying to achieve is definitely key.
All right, before we get into the kind of the how UFCU, put their plan together and began to build their tech stack, I wanted to ask you, Carrie, about some of the goals that yourself and UFCU had as far as when you were launching this project. Would you be able to tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the biggest goal was creating efficiency and creating workflows that make sense for our, sales and operations teams, as well as always focusing on the member experience. That's at the forefront of everything we do. So, looking at our previous solutions that we made a change from, moving to Flowify and Bonzo, we really wanted to make sure it was something where we could create workflows that were customized, that made sense for a credit union. For example, just being able to simply identify if they're a member with us or not, and automate, prompting them to establish that membership if they haven't already. A lot of our mortgage business that comes to the door is outside sourced, right? Our loan officers going out with their realtor partners and bringing people into the credit union. So that was a big important part of it. as well as, creating automation, creating efficiency, and making a seamless member journey to where, everything makes sense. They're not having to call us and ask the status of their loan. They just know because the system is telling them what they need to know at that time.
Awesome. I know when we had spoken previously, we talked about, now that we've gone through some of the implementation and have some of those early results, particularly when it comes to the efficiency, can you speak to that and what you guys have seen as far as those early results and kind of how that relates to what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. We implemented Flowify in the last half of 2024. And as we compared, our early pilot data to the loans that were being closed in our previous point of sale, what we saw was that our days to get initial app into pre-qualification reduced by 50%. So we went from 2.8 to 1.4 days. Mainly based on automation around using the data in the application to request the documents that we actually need. So if that member applies with us and they're self-employed, it's going to ask them for tax returns, not pay stubs. So when those loan officers, for about 2/3 of their applications, as they're receiving them, they're coming in with all the documentation they need to be able to get an underwriter's eyes on it, if necessary, to issue that pre-qualification.
Makes sense. And Carrie and Jason, I'd love to hear from, the vendor perspective. Are those goals, something that you would expect other credit unions to not only, want to achieve, but then also with the right investments be able to achieve?
Yeah, for sure. I'm seeing a lot of talks or having a lot of talks with credit unions about efficiencies. How can we process loans quicker, faster, easier? And a lot of that's getting the data up front, like the workflows. Certain loans ask for certain type of documentation. So in our workflows with Flowify, we're able to, based on those questions answered, be able to request that up front. So it speeds the time up for that approval process, which in the purchase market, I know here in the St. Louis market, there could be 20 offers on a house. So getting that pre-approval letter over quickly is key to winning that bid. And that's what I think we do a very good job of doing, that is speeding up that process, helping the credit unions with different workflows that they have. If if there are different things and, from a HELOC to a first mortgage, we can do those workflows and be specific on the documents that's requested by the credit union and for those members.
Yeah, I think that's extra important when we, compare and contrast what Rocket does well, right? Like they are not highlighting that member experience, or in their case, borrower experience. That's not where their strength is. Their strength is speed up front and having that integration that allows them to do kind of what Carrie was referring to, with get that pre-qual time down, right? So that they can capture more of those applications and get them through their pipeline. Right. So let's talk about actually going through this process, and how you do, the vendor vetting process, actually getting to that point of, okay, this is what we want. We've established what our goals are. We have a thought about how we're going to accomplish that. And then, what exactly does that look like from the credit union perspective, Carrie?
Yeah, of course. I think credit unions, are very diligent in, selecting vendors, making sure that it's, passing risk assessment, really doing a deep evaluation in both the cost and the safety to protect our members, because that member experience is at the forefront of everything we do. We recently had a new chief lending officer come on board, who brought in consultant Jody Hall, who's very well connected in the mortgage tech space, that helped, bring us vendors that would meet the goals that we were looking for that vetting. So that was invaluable in helping us, not just, sometimes I feel like as a credit union, you might not have all the knowledge on everything that's out there. And she's super knowledgeable and really helped us narrow down the field into the vendors we wanted to look at. And, her relationships, particularly with Bonzo and Flowify, have been invaluable to help us create this tech stack and leverage those relationships to make it work for our workflow and our needs.
Yeah, I think you may have already touched on it a little bit, but when we're talking about prioritization, right? And we talked about customization being important to UFCU based on, how to accomplish those goals. But part of customization, I think, relies on not just, you having some understanding of what you want, but also how everybody at the credit union uses these solutions. And,
Absolutely.
making sure that they're comfortable, not just to get that buy-in, but also to make sure that you're on the right path, to make sure the workflows work. So could you, kind of elaborate more on how you go through that feedback loop and, and work with the various stakeholders?
Yeah, I think this is actually where I bring the most value to our leadership team, is because I did spend so many years in processing and here specifically at USCU. So I have great rapport and relationships with our sales team, with our operations team, where I'm able to get that feedback. And I think most importantly, they trust that I'm going to take action on it. And when something's broken or not working as expected, I'm going to do the work to fix it. And I think anytime you're taking something that's not an out-of-box solution, that you are customizing it, it is a lot of work to get it working well and working as intended. And I think sometimes, it can be easy to discount that work. And, you have to make sure you have somebody on your team that's willing to dig in and solicit the feedback and then respond to it, because ultimately you have to have the trust of your team and your leadership team. If you're throwing tech on, but not, taking the time to make it good and to gain that trust and relationships is at the forefront of everything I do. That is where my vendor relationships, my leadership relationships, our business partners throughout the credit union, with our IT team, our marketing team, that's where I focus most of my energy, because without that information, without that buy-in, nothing I'm doing is going to matter. So that's my biggest focus always.
Awesome. And Carol and Jason, maybe you can speak from the vendor perspective about kind of that relationship, part. I think, Carol, you mentioned this at the beginning of the call, and making sure that your vendors are open to working with each other, right? And making sure that that sandbox is, inclusive of everybody to put the best product forward.
Right. Having, web hooks, true APIs, connectors, so that the information can pass between, all of the pieces of the tech stack where it needs to be, transferred. But then also you take it to another level where, Carol was talking about, relationships and personalities. You can customize, your messaging from some of these, like I'll say from the CRM, that allows a loan officer to let their personality come through. You can have, a set automation that's, set up to go out overall, but, give them some leeway to, put their personality in there, because people, want to work with people. They don't want to work with just an automated message from a machine, right? So it's nice that they can have, a good overall customization and communication from, all of their sources.
Yeah, sure. I think too, it's important to test before you roll it out, because adoption is huge. If LOs don't adopt the tech stack that you're building out, then it doesn't work. So I like the fact that we tested and found some bugs, fixed the bugs before we rolled it out. That way, when you roll out, they're ready to go. We know it's stable. We know everything's working. And then it also is tech. I like the fact too, like with Bonzo's a great partner with us, where if there is problems, we fix it. We don't point fingers, we fix it. It's never, no, it's them or that or us, but we'll look at the problem, fix it. It's tech. So stuff may happen, may not. If it doesn't, great. But when it does, we fix it quickly. And I think that's a huge deal when it comes to vendors, to make sure that they have the bandwidth and the customer support on the back end. You don't need customer support until you need it. And I think that's a big deal when it comes to a new tech stack and rolling out. You got to have the ability to be able to pick up the phone and get questions answered for you.
And Jason, those relationships, like you said, that helps get it done faster, right? Correct. So like if Carrie calls us and we're waiting on Flowify, or Flowify is waiting on us, if we have a great relationship, the vendors with each other, we get on the phone with each other and we fix it. Yep. So it means a lot.
Yep.
My capacity has been far more of the bottleneck than Firefox. So we've been working through this project, that's for sure.
Carrie, what kind of advice would you give to another credit union, like someone that's on this call, they're thinking about undertaking this project, based on your experience going through it, as far as like the vetting and kind of up until the point of rollout, right? What would you say were some of those unforeseen sort of challenges and or things that you didn't expect to go as well as they did?
Yeah, I think that, this was my first time implementing a point of sale. So I think I was overwhelmed initially, but I think just, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Like, take it step by step as you work through it, lean on your vendor partners as to what is important, because there's so much functionality, right? So like I think one thing we were very intentional is we didn't want to turn on too much at once. So start with a foundation, let's lay a groundwork. These are all the things we have to have. What do we have to make this transition, and move all the other nice bells and whistles, nice to have, as things we will add on as we go. So like an onion, because I think, change fatigue is real, right? If you throw too much at people at once, it will be overwhelming. So I've always tried to think of myself in their shoes, as if I'm feeling overwhelmed with trying to plan this out, they're going to feel overwhelmed with trying to digest it. So really focusing on what are the minimums that we need to make this transition, and then how do we build from there.
Awesome. I love that analogy of the onion, just like the layers and
Yeah.
peeling it back one at a time.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of, let's talk about adoption. So now we've gone through that process, the vetting, getting our vendors identified, understanding our goals. What do we want to accomplish? Now it's time to do maybe what's arguably the harder part of the process, right? So, again, Carrie, I'm asking from the credit union perspective, what were some of those sort of big brushstrokes of this is how we're going to go about rollout, right? Like I think we just talked about the onion. So in that phasing per se, and maybe you can speak more to that.
Yeah, I think as an organization as a whole, we've undergone a lot of executive leadership change in the past few years. And one thing we're really focused on is that continuous improvement, and that we're not just, standing up a new technology and leaving it as is. We want technology that we can continue to improve upon to make better for our members and for our employees. So gaining feedback, we try as much as possible to test and pilot things with a select group of SMEs before we're bringing it out to the group as a whole. That really prevents any sort of big, giant post-rollout issues. And then making sure we listen to, as we go through that pilot and as we implement to the full team, any feedback they have, and addressing. It might not all be things we can fix or even want to fix. Not everybody's opinion is necessarily something we're going to take and run with, but making sure we close the loop and they know why or why not maybe something didn't get changed, because the more they feel heard, the more they'll give you that feedback. And that feedback is gold. If something's broken, you're never going to know if somebody doesn't tell you. So that's where I think the change management and reinforcement, and making sure that any issues that come up at least get addressed, and the employees know why that may or may not have been fixed in their view, is crucial.
Awesome. One thing I know we had spoken about previously was, sort of how do you prioritize during the rollout, right? Like building that foundation. Can you give us some insight into kind of how you guys decided to structure your rollout and in those solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we initially, when we took on this project, we're trying to go full speed ahead with everything. And, it just so happened that one solution was ready from our vendor management, business partners before the other. So it sort of happened very organically. It was like, all right, well, let's take the thing that's ready and let's roll with it. And, that's in trying to move quickly. We haven't waited for everything to be perfect. Like, what is ready? What can we get out and roll out well, where we're not delaying entire projects by months because this one piece isn't ready. So, making sure we're making progress over perfection has been what we've really focused on.
I love that. And I think Carol and Jason, you guys can speak to how many times you've seen credit unions, taking a year even sometimes to get implemented, and kind of even through testing and deployment.
Or just get a vendor approval.
Right, exactly.
It happens.
Yeah, what would you say I think you kind of touched on it, but what would you say the biggest benefits of kind of taking that approach of let's go, versus testing every little thing, make sure every little thing's perfect?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is that we made a point of sale transition not too long ago, and I think we shaved 3-4 months off that timeline with this one, so we were able to definitely move faster. Obviously, then we did have more post rollout things to fix, right? But I will say the perfectly planned one also had post implementation. Like, I don't feel like I don't feel like the goal of a perfect rollout is achievable. So just sort of shifting from that, from a PM standpoint, from a waterfall to an agile mindset, like, let's get out what we can that's good, and then be willing to do the work and not expect to never touch it again. That's just not, leaning into that continuous improvement mindset. It's not reality. So how do we continue to work and make progress and move forward for the team?
It's funny, we just had this same conversation internally this morning, whereas you cannot just wait for every little box to be checked for every new product or program or service you're going to send out. Go at it, because it's ever changing. So start with what you can, and then maybe have a phase 1, or a phase 2 or 3. I think it's brilliant the way you go at it. It's great.
Thank you.
I'm curious how you continue to take in feedback. Like we talked about that pre-deployment, feedback loop, but now you're into it already. The team is already using these solutions, and how do you continue to manage that communication and check in on the people who are the boots on the ground, to make sure everything's working right?
I think this is the relationship building. I mean, one, I absolutely, we do post-implementation check-ins and make sure, we're tracking any issues and responses to those. But I walk around the office. We're in person Tuesdays and Thursdays. I come in, I chat with the sales team, I chat with the ops team. They'll call me directly if they have, an issue on something that's not working right. And, certain percentage of the time, the answer's already in the job aid. Like, they could have checked it, but I like that they feel that comfort with me, because it knows that I know that they will tell me when something's not working. And that's that relationship and trust building. I think that's where, we had people in this role before, who came from other departments or came from other areas, and the trust wasn't there. It's so crucial. I can't emphasize it enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know how difficult change management is.
Yeah.
It's as we just talked about, everything is ever changing. Even post deployment, things are still changing, especially as you're layering on other solutions. So it's not only, how's this working, but also let's drop something else on now that we feel comfortable. Let's see how that's gonna go.
Exactly.
I imagine that takes a lot of buy-in, like from the just top down.
It does. And it's not something you can fake either. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that works well for me, because I'm a very genuine, intentional person in my relationships. Like, I'm a people person, I'm an extrovert. And I feel like a lot of times in the tech space, that's not the natural personality that probably lands there. But that is, my biggest thing is people and how I can engage. And that's where, I bring the most value to make these technologies run smoothly and work well for the team.
How do you manage those expectations? I'm sure there's lots of people who think like new stuff, like it's either going to be great or it's going to be terrible. And I think the truth is usually it's somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. There's pros and cons to every technology you implement. And I think I'm just very open and honest with the team when it comes to that. Maybe sometimes too honest. But I'm like, there's no, one thing they'll constantly, the sales team we have a set of AMCs they work with. Some want to only work with this one, and that one is not the same. So I tell them that all the time. I'm like, y'all are not aligned on what your perfect version of how we do mortgages is. So, I think that the having that trust and rapport helps, them understand that I'm working for them. And I'm probably a psycho and a workaholic, and I probably do way too much. So I think they see that and appreciate that. And they know I'm working to get them what they need so they can get more loans in the door.
One thing that I think might be a little complicated in all of this is something that you had talked with us about previously, is that UFCU is also expanding regionally and expanding services out away from Austin. And how does that work in with this? You're rolling these things out, but you're also bringing on new branches and kind of going through that process.
Yes, yeah, that is definitely a big vision of where we're going, right? Like when I started here in 2010, we were still battling you do mortgages? I thought you only did car loans, which I feel like is a very typical credit union problem when they start getting into the mortgage side. And so we built it from there, and we grew, and we've been top lender locally in Austin for several years now. So where does that growth come? It's going to come outside of Austin. And that's a big focus of our new leadership in mortgage, and how do we grow beyond the city limits, because there's only so many people buying houses in Austin. And that's where the technology is really going to help us, because we had a lot of processes that were manual that work when you're small and all of our staff is in one building and we can all talk to each other and work it out. But as we bring these on, the technology is more and more important. We make sure we have things that work for loan officers we're bringing in and their book of business, so that we can continue to grow.
How do you handle that training component? Is it like a pre-designed thing, or are you bringing them in office and getting hands-on?
Yeah, it's virtual generally. So we do have, a fabulous organizational development team that has helped sort of craft a new employee orientation for being in a virtual environment, because some of those employees are not here in Austin or can't travel to Austin. So we make sure that we're adjusting to them. We're not trying to force them into our way of doing things, and because we want them to grow for our goals. So got to make it work.
And Jason and Carol, I'm curious from the vendor perspective, like how you guys work with credit unions that maybe aren't so gung-ho about moving fast and moving forward, and how do you manage that relationship and kind of push through that hesitancy?
Go ahead, Jason.
I don't think I think it more or less is just setting the right expectations and getting, when do you want to go live? How do you want to roll things out? And then just holding those lines and communicating that if we do miss a date, it could push back a rollout, it could do this, and just communicate back and forth. As a vendor, or I consider us a partner. When we engage, we're partners. So we're here to help you go as quickly or as slowly as you need. So based on those timelines, we're going to adjust on that. And I think as long as communication is between the two, I think that helps. I know we take a lot of the heavy lifting out for the most part. We try to make it very easy. I mean, it is a point of sale. It is a heavy lift to do some things, but we take the hard out of it, so to speak, and then try to make it as easy as possible. We have a turnkey where you can just roll it out, turnkey, and do it, or we're very configurable. So based on workflows and based on different customizations you need with syncs to the LOS, we can do all that. And that could slow down a little bit because we got to test those too. Got to make sure that the communication is going back and forth. But far as a rollout and far as implementation, I think our team here at Flowify does a very good job of going at the pace needed, fast or slow.
I can tell you, as much as the credit unions are progressing out there, there's still some that I speak to that don't have a marketing department or a marketing person at all. Or like, Carrie said, sometimes doing mortgage loans was kind of an afterthought, so they're still building that. So we have the ability to provide a person that can really kind of fit into that space for them. So we have, extra offerings, if you will, to kind of step in as that marketing person. And then the way we implement, we try to work with that marketing person or the designated person that is kind of owning the project and making sure they are well aware of everything the system can do. Because even though you don't start with maybe using every aspect of a piece of technology, you might, like we talked about earlier, evolve into it, but you got to know what's available. And then we then do a secondary training to the users, and we train what is available for them to use coming from higher up, right? So we don't want to, show them all these things and they go back like, wait, I didn't even know about this. So we really try to work in concert with, our executives, following their lead, doing the right type of training. And then you always have to go back and do remedial training, right? Because sometimes after you launch something, you might need to come back 3 months later and say, okay, what's working, what's not, and what can we do to kind of refresh? Because we also have new producers coming in, and we want to make sure that if you have a trainer, like a train the trainer situation, we have to constantly keep those folks up to snuff. So we have various ways you can approach it.
I think that's it's really interesting. You talked about like the different features and stuff, right? And different solutions and how that lends itself to like a phased rollout where you're not just rolling out one solution, you might be rolling out a part of that solution, and then kind of expanding those capabilities as you go.
Yeah.
That's smart. Carrie, any sort of lessons learned through that kind of post-deployment process? Any of those big,
So many lessons.
wish I'd done this differently, or wow, this worked out so much better.
Share the good ones.
I think piloting is crucial. I think to, stressing the importance to the SMEs as to how important testing is. I think that's our biggest area for improvement. And I would have been guilty of this as a processor too, right? Like, oh, let's process. Okay, I'm gonna run your little test cases. And, the testing is so crucial to make sure that pilot is set up for success, and then to make sure that pilot identifies most of the issues before going live to the team. So I think, getting that SME engagement during that testing and pilot phase has been the biggest takeaway for me, just because there's going to be even more to come post rollout, always is, but the more feedback we can get in those times, the more, I'm really grateful to our sales team because they're, I feel like a bit of a unique case. They actually like giving me feedback and trying to make, they like having opportunity to have influence, right? And, tweak things to what they're used to doing and how they're used to doing loans. So, but if you don't have a sales team that's going to work for you, it's going to make it way more difficult. As we had a couple things where we didn't discover all the things we could have discovered in testing, and it led to more post rollout issues. So, yeah.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, we want to move fast, but we also need to be diligent and just make sure we're doing as much testing and closing that feedback loop.
It's like a live wire balancing act. Like, I don't think there's anything that's perfect, but we do the best we can.
Awesome. Well, we've got a few minutes left, so I think what we'll do is take some questions. I've got a few, some of which we've kind of touched on, but maybe we could expound on. So this one comes back to kind of the pre-qualification and how we were able to cut that. I think you did mention exactly how that was accomplished, or at least what those big drivers were.
Yes.
Maybe you can kind of elaborate.
Yeah, our previous point of sale just had didn't really have any automated task workflow. It would ask for like driver's license, bank statements, pay stubs, W-2s by default. And I also felt like the nothing prompted the members to upload that immediately, even though it would assign immediately. So what we found with Flowify is we were able to, one, create rules that were actually intuitive based on the data that member gives us in their application. Obviously, it's only as good as the data inputted, right? We've all had people that are self-employed that apply, not just self-employed. So it's not going to be perfect 100% of the time. But we were able to see the vast majority and kind of how Flowify works when they complete the application, it immediately takes them into those tasks. So, as I was watching through the pilot, a good 60+% of people, as they completed that application, went immediately into uploading their docs. So by the time the loan officer even touched it, everything was there that they needed to establish that pre-qual and either issue it immediately or be like, ooh, there's something I need to get an underwriter's eyes on. So that's where we saw the lift.
Awesome. All right, let's see. How do you balance customization with keeping the tech manageable for your team?
Yeah, it's very difficult. We did one of the solutions we looked at that we ended up not moving forward with from a CRM point of sale perspective was completely configurable. They didn't really have a set of like out of the box. So that's where I felt like what Flowify and Bonzo brought us really met that happy medium where there are a lot of things we can customize. There's a lot of customization, but there is sort of standard settings you can start with. So we took those standard settings and we reviewed them and we established what we needed to customize on top of that, and to create the custom workflow that we needed to support our business. And I feel like that's the great place to cut that balance. Because if you get into too much customization, it's just way more work for maybe not as heavy of a lift. Like, things come out of the box for a reason, right? Like, there are standards in mortgage industry for a reason. So it's a difficult balancing act, but I feel like we accomplished it well with Bonzo and Flowify.
Absolutely. This one I think is probably better for Carol and Jason, but it says, how can smaller credit unions that have limited budgets or staffing start modernizing operations?
You can start at the lowest level. You can, you know what I mean? You can, I don't think it's, there goes my computer. It's a, I think, doesn't matter how small you are, really. I mean, there's like our CRM can support single users all the way up to 1,000 users, right? And, it's just a matter of, like Carrie was saying, start things small, right? Maybe, don't launch everything at one time, and then utilize some of the customer service that, either Flowify or Bonzo can provide to help you get started, and use best practices that they've learned over the years supporting other clients to help you get started. Jason, I don't know.
Yeah, I second that. We have users, credit unions with 2 loan officers on up to credit unions that have hundreds. So we can do the small to large. We can make it, the ROIs there for each case. It's just a matter of working through what your needs are and what you need to do to capture market share. One thing I definitely say is, with a good member experience, you're not only just getting that mortgage. A lot of times it could be a new member, a deposit account. It could be other loans like car loans and different things by getting that new member by doing that mortgage. So there's more than just a mortgage that's done. So if you give them a good experience on the mortgage side of things, they're going to be confident that they can get a good experience on that auto loan or open up a CD or whatever the credit union has to offer on other retail products. So it's a way to get other business as well.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like, not every credit union is going to have a Carrie, right? Who's got all that wide ranging skill set. So in those cases, like, that doesn't mean don't start. That doesn't mean don't do it. Just make sure you're leaning on your partners.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for, is to help guide in those areas that maybe there isn't experience to lean on. So I think that's
Your vendors in your tech stack have dealt with all types of clients, so they can share best practices and kind of help guide you in that, in that direction.
Awesome. I think that's going to bring us right about to time. Anybody, with questions that we didn't get to, we'll reach out by email. And, again, we did record, so we'll be, getting that processed and sent out to anybody who attended or didn't attend but registered. Just want to again thank ACUMA for sponsoring and putting this on with us, as well as Carol and Carrie and Jason. Thank you all for joining. So much fun working with you guys and getting to see under the hood a little bit of how you work and what you do. So thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a great happy holiday from this end.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, y'all.
Happy holidays. Take care.
Everybody.
Bye.